Why is it that the public only ever finds out about a worst-case scenario virus once it's already crossed 3 continents?
Well, I mean, it comes down to this fundamental mismatch between biology and bureaucracy. Pathogens, they don't respect borders, and they certainly don't wait for, committee approvals.
Right.
Right now, in May 2026, we are literally watching a live demonstration of that reality.
And our mission in this deep dive is to really figure out how a local pathogen becomes a global crisis. So for everyone listening, paint a picture of what we're actually looking at out there on the water.
Okay, so the MV Hondius is a 300-foot expedition-style cruise ship. It's built for navigating remote waters, right?
Yeah.
Not for carrying thousands of people like those massive floating resorts you might see in the Caribbean.
Got it. Smaller scale.
It's much smaller. Right now, there are 147 passengers and crew on board, and the ship is currently stalled off the coast of Cape Verde, which is an island nation off the west coast of Africa.
Okay.
But if you look at the maritime tracking data, the data you have right there, this isn't just a ship waiting for routine docking clearance. It is a floating, highly contained, silent threat.
Because of what is trapped inside the hull with them.
Exactly.
We are talking about Hantavirus here, but, I realized my own mental model of Hantavirus was just completely outdated.
How so?
Well, I always pictured it as a rural occupational hazard. You sweep out a dusty old barn, you inhale some aerosolized rodent droppings, and you get a severe respiratory infection. But the key being, it stops with you. It doesn't jump from person to person.
Right, and that is the standard clinical profile for most hantaviruses, like the Cinnombre virus we see in the American Southwest. Those are strictly rodent to human.
So if 10 people get sick, they all inhaled the same dust?
Exactly. If 10 people show up at a hospital with Cinnombre, it's because 10 distinct individuals were in the same contaminated shed.
Whoa.
But the epidemiological reports we're looking at confirm the pathogen on the MV Hondius is the Andes strain.
And that changes everything.
It changes everything. Originating in South America, the Andes strain possesses this incredibly rare, highly dangerous biological capability.
Yeah.
It has human-to-human transmission.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because you have a locked environment in the middle of the ocean, and the killer isn't a person, it's an invisible pathogen that doesn't even need a rat to spread anymore, it just needs human contact.
Right.
That fundamentally changes the math of an outbreak, doesn't it?
It changes the math entirely. And it leverages what we can look at as a sort of Trojan horse timeline.
What do you mean by that?
So many respiratory viruses like influenza or, a coronavirus, they announce themselves quickly. You get exposed, and within 3 to 5 days, your immune system triggers a fever, you start coughing, and you isolate.
Right, you're sick.
Exactly. But the Andes hantavirus has an incubation period that can range from 1 to 8 weeks.
Wait, 8 weeks?
Up to 42 to 60 days. We are talking about a smoldering fuse. Before the initial symptoms even begin to show, the virus is already at work. We call it the information tax. By the time you feel sick, the game is already over.
Wow. Help me understand that mechanically. How does a virus physically hide inside a human body for 2 entire months without setting off any alarms?
It's really a masterclass in viral stealth. When you inhale the virus, it targets specific cells called macrophages.
Okay.
Which is ironic because those are the very cells your immune system uses to hunt down invaders. The virus quietly infects these sentinels and actually uses them as vehicles to travel through the lymphatic system.
Like hijacking a police car.
Exactly like hijacking a police car. It eventually reaches the endothelial cells, which line your blood vessels, and it replicates at this painfully slow, deliberate pace. It's actively suppressing the body's early warning signals, which are called interferons.
So your body just doesn't know it's there.
It has no idea. By the time the virus reaches a critical mass and your immune system finally realizes it's under attack, the virus is everywhere. The transmission window has likely already opened and closed.
So if the incubation period is 60 days, the real crime didn't happen on that ship in May. It happened months ago.
Yes.
Where were these people in March? Let's look at the origin point.
So the initial epidemiological trace points back to a married couple. In early March, they were on a birdwatching expedition traveling through Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay.
Deep Patagonia, which is visually stunning, obviously, but it's also the exact natural habitat of the specific sylvatic rodents that carry the Andes strain.
Correct.
And just to clarify for everyone listening, when we say sylvatic, we are talking about wild, forest-dwelling animals, right? This is entirely separate from the urban rats you see scurrying around city subways.
Right, completely different ecosystem. Specifically, we're talking about the long-tailed pygmy rice rat. These travelers are moving through these ecologically diverse, remote brushlands. They likely brushed against a contaminated nest, or maybe they just sat on a dusty log to take a picture.
Just a completely innocent moment.
We will never know the exact microscopic moment of exposure.
Yeah.
But on March 20th, they walked up the gangway and boarded the MV Hondius in Ushuaia, Argentina.
Feeling perfectly healthy.
They felt perfectly healthy. They had no idea they were carrying a biological ticking time bomb.
And the ship departs on April 1st, right? Heading across the South Atlantic. It goes down through the Antarctic Circle over to South Georgia and then starts pushing north towards Africa.
Right.
So for days, these passengers are dining together. They're leaning over the same railings, sharing these incredibly close quarters.
Yeah, and the first fracture in the timeline happens on April 6th. The husband develops a fever, a headache, and some mild gastrointestinal distress.
Which, on a ship that size, the onboard clinic probably just assumes is norovirus, right? Or food poisoning.
Of course. It's the most logical assumption. But the virus had already finished its quiet replication phase. Just 5 days later, on April 11th, he develops acute respiratory distress and dies on the ship.
From a mild headache to fatal respiratory failure in under a week.
It's incredibly fast once the stealth phase ends. And this is where the what we call the business model of delay for this pathogen becomes so devastating.
Right, because they don't know what killed him.
Exactly. There are no advanced microbiological laboratories on an expedition ship. They have no way to definitively diagnose it. So the ship just keeps moving. 13 days later, on April 24th, they arrive at the remote island of St. Helena. The husband's body is taken ashore.
And his wife.
His wife, who obviously has been in intimate contact with him, also disembarks. And by this point, she is reporting severe gastrointestinal symptoms herself.
Okay, let me pause you there. Because when you look at the flight maps, you realize that St. Helena isn't just an isolated island. It's a stepping stone.
Yes, it's a major connection point.
Because the very next day, April 25th, this grieving, severely ill woman boards a commercial jet bound for Johannesburg, South Africa.
And during that flight, her condition enters the final catastrophic phase. She collapses. She is rushed to an emergency room upon landing in Johannesburg, and she dies the next day, April 26th.
Wait, help me understand the fear for someone actually on that ship right now. Or even worse, the people sitting next to her on that flight to Johannesburg. I'm trying to, put myself in the shoes of the passenger in seat 14B.
It's terrifying to think about.
You are thousands of feet in the air, the person next to you is collapsing, and you have absolutely no idea that you are breathing the air near a deadly transmissible pathogen. You think you're just witnessing a heart attack or something.
Exactly. And it highlights a profound vulnerability in modern travel. The intelligence gap is massive. South African authorities had to immediately initiate this huge contact tracing operation.
Hunting down flight manifests.
Hunting down manifests. Tracking passengers who had already dispersed across the entire continent. Because it wasn't until May 2nd, and this is crucial, from a completely different passenger, that global authorities even realized what they were fighting.
Hold on, so while the couple's tragedy is unfolding, the virus is already spiderwebbing out to others.
It was already moving. Another passenger, an adult male, went to the ship's doctor on April 24th with a fever. By April 26th, he was deteriorating so rapidly that he had to be medically evacuated from Ascension Island to an intensive care unit in South Africa.
Wow.
And that requires highly specialized transport. We're talking isolation pods, flight crews in full biohazard gear. It was his diagnostic tests in South Africa on May 2nd that finally triggered the global alarm.
And the web kept widening, right?
It did. An eighth case, a man who got off the ship at St. Helena, boarded a series of flights, and suddenly turned up at a hospital in Zurich, Switzerland.
He flew all the way to Switzerland before the symptoms hit.
Yes. The Geneva University hospitals ran the genetic sequence of his blood samples and confirmed the identity of the pathogen. It was the Andes strain.
So if we look at the board right now, you have a virus confirmed in a Zurich hospital, a patient fighting for his life in a South African ICU, deceased patients in St. Helena and Johannesburg, and a ship stalled off the coast of Africa.
A completely fragmented global crisis.
Right. And when that genetic sequence came back, global health authorities immediately shifted their posture. Why did the phrase Andes strain on a cruise ship cause such an intense, almost panicked reaction behind closed doors?
Well, the reaction stems from a really chilling piece of recent medical history. The epidemiological community, they immediately look back at the 2018 Argentina super spreader event.
I saw that mentioned. What exactly happened in 2018?
That was the moment our understanding of this virus fundamentally shifted. It started with a single introduction from a rodent, but the transmission was driven by a crowded social event. It was a simple indoor birthday party.
A birthday party.
Yeah. And that one gathering sparked a chain reaction that resulted in 34 confirmed infections and 11 deaths.
Oh my God.
And the most terrifying part, the transmission was driven almost entirely by just 3 symptomatic people. Before control measures were put in place, the reproduction number, the R0, was calculated at 2.12.
Meaning every infected person was statistically infecting more than 2 others.
Correct. And when you are dealing with a pathogen that has an astronomically high mortality rate, an R0 of over 2 inside a highly confined space like an expedition ship is a catastrophic metric.
Let's talk about that mortality rate, because the clinical reality of this disease is incredibly grim, and I want to understand the mechanisms here. What does the virus actually do to the body to make it so lethal?
The clinical term is Hantavirus cardiopulmonary syndrome, or HCPS. The mortality rate in the Americas ranges between 30% and 50%.
That's essentially a coin flip.
It is. Remember earlier when we talked about the virus targeting the endothelial cells, the lining of your blood vessels?
Yeah, the stealth phase where it's hiding out.
Right. Well, once the immune system finally detects the massive viral load, it just panics. It launches an overwhelming counterattack, releasing this massive flood of inflammatory proteins called cytokines.
A cytokine storm.
Exactly. And this immune response is so aggressive that it actually damages those endothelial cells, causing the blood vessels in your lungs to become highly permeable. They literally start leaking blood plasma directly into your alveoli. Those are the tiny air sacs where your body exchanges oxygen.
So you aren't technically being destroyed by the virus itself. You are drowning in the collateral damage of your own immune response.
You drown from the inside, which leads to rapid cardiovascular collapse because the heart simply cannot pump blood without oxygen. And the terrifying part of HCPS is the complete lack of pharmacological interventions.
So no drugs.
There is no vaccine. There is no specific licensed antiviral cure.
So if a patient goes into respiratory distress, how do doctors actually fight it?
Survival depends entirely on aggressive mechanical supportive care. It requires early admission to an ICU. Initially, doctors use mechanical ventilation, literally forcing oxygen into the fluid-filled lungs. But for the most severe cases, the lungs fail completely. That is when you need ECMO.
ECMO, extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. I've seen those machines mentioned in the reports. How do they actually work in practice?
It's a profound piece of medical engineering. Doctors insert thick tubes into the major veins. The machine physically pumps the dark, deoxygenated blood out of the patient's body, runs it through an artificial membrane lung that removes carbon dioxide and adds oxygen, and then pumps the bright red, oxygen-rich blood back into the body.
That's incredible.
It is. You are bypassing the patient's destroyed lungs entirely, buying the immune system time to clear the virus and heal the tissue. But you need a highly advanced medical infrastructure just to give a patient a fighting chance.
And obviously, an expedition cruise ship stalled off the coast of Africa does not have an ECMO machine sitting in the sick bay.
Not even close.
Which brings me back to the human cost of this. Think about the psychological reality for the people confined to their cabins right now. It is a nightmare situation. You're trapped for up to 60 days of incubation. You feel perfectly fine today. You're looking out the porthole at the ocean, but you know you might be a ticking time bomb tomorrow.
It's an unimaginable stress.
Every time you clear your throat or feel a little warm, you have to wonder if your capillaries are about to start leaking.
The psychological toll is immense. They are essentially serving a 2-month probation period within their own bodies. However, if there is a tactical advantage for the health authorities trying to contain this, it lies in the nuance of how the virus physically sheds from a human host.
Viral shedding meaning how the virus exits the infected person to find a new host, right? So it's not like measles, right? It doesn't hang in the air of the dining room for hours after an infected person leaves.
Thankfully, no. While it can spread person to person, it requires close, prolonged contact. We're talking about sharing a small cabin, nursing a sick spouse, or, a healthcare worker providing intimate medical care without proper biocontainment gear. Crucially, the viral shedding is most potent during a specific window called the febrile prodrome phase.
And what happens during that phase?
That is the window where the patient first develops a fever and muscle aches, but before the severe respiratory collapse begins. During those few days, the virus is replicating furiously and exiting the body through bodily fluids, saliva, sweat.
So it's very physical transmission at that point.
Highly physical. In a 2011 outbreak in Chile, epidemiological tracers actually found that transmission occurred through highly intimate contact, like sharing a bed with someone who is sweating through their sheets or kissing a sick relative on the cheek.
So if you can isolate people in individual cabins the moment they feel warm, you drastically cut the transmission chain.
Exactly. Strict cabin isolation and rigorous hygiene protocols are highly effective. The key is preventing the exchange of bodily fluids and preventing any dry sweeping of cabins, which could kick dormant viral particles back into the air.
But isolation on a stalled ship isn't a long-term solution. I mean, these people need a safe port, and the local health infrastructure in Cape Verde cannot manage an outbreak of a virus that requires ECMO machines to treat. So how is this actually being resolved?
Well, what we're watching unfold is a massive, highly coordinated logistical ballet. This isn't just a local emergency anymore, it's a global web of action. First, local doctors from Cape Verde bravely boarded the ship in full protective gear to stabilize and assess the symptomatic patients.
Right.
Then the Dutch authorities stepped in because the ship operates under a Dutch flag, and they coordinated complex medical evacuations, flying the most critical patients to advanced isolation wards in the Netherlands and Germany.
Meanwhile, South Africa is utilizing its disease surveillance network to hunt down the flight contacts from St. Helena.
Exactly. And Argentina, who possesses the deepest institutional knowledge of the Andes strain, immediately mobilized. They manufactured and shipped 2,500 specialized PCR diagnostic kits to laboratories across 5 different countries.
Just to pause there and clarify for everyone, the PCR, the polymerase chain reaction test, is vital because it looks for the specific genetic fingerprint of the virus, right? You need those specific kits so a doctor in Zurich doesn't mistake a hantavirus infection for, say, a severe case of the flu.
Precisely. Without those specific primers provided by Argentina, the receiving countries would essentially be flying blind. And finally, Spain stepped up to the plate.
Spain taking the ship.
Yes. The Spanish Prime Minister agreed to let the MV Hondius dock in the Canary Islands, providing a secure, advanced European port to safely disembark the remaining passengers under strict quarantine protocols.
It is genuinely incredible to see that level of cooperation.
It really is. Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, the Director General of the WHO, framed this specific incident perfectly. He pointed out that this complex, multinational response is the exact reason the international health regulations exist.
The IHR.
Right. It is a live demonstration of global solidarity. These are the protocols and emergency frameworks decided in rooms you aren't in, functioning in real time to contain a deadly threat before it spirals completely out of control.
Okay, but is this the moment the world should be holding its breath? Because I feel a deep sense of awe at the medical coordination, sure. But I also feel a lingering terror at how close this came to slipping through the cracks.
I completely understand that.
Like, did the system actually work by design, or did we just get incredibly lucky that the Spanish Prime Minister answered the phone and agreed to absorb the risk? What if this ship had stalled off the coast of a nation with closed borders and zero resources?
And that is the structural vulnerability in global health. The system functioned, yes, but it inherently relies on the political willingness of sovereign nations to accept risk. Spain taking the ship is an act of political courage, just as much as it is medical protocol.
Exactly.
But if we look at the objective assessments from the WHO, the US CDC, and the Africa CDC, the broader global risk of this specific outbreak is currently categorized as low.
Low? Really?
Yes. The outbreak appears to be confined to the ship and the immediate traceable flight contacts. Once strict isolation is enforced, the R0 drops dramatically below 1, and the outbreak essentially starves itself of new hosts.
So, despite the dramatic timeline, this isn't the start of a border-closing apocalyptic pandemic.
No, the risk to the general public worldwide remains incredibly low.
Yeah.
But we cannot afford to just turn the page and move on. The ultimate insight we have to extract from the MV Hondius is that our biological interconnectedness is no longer just a philosophical concept. It is a daily, physical reality.
Yeah. Think about what we just traced over the last 15 minutes. A microscopic drop of mouse saliva in a remote Patagonian forest, hitched a ride on a luxury cruise liner, boarded a commercial Boeing jet, and ended up triggering alarms in an intensive care unit in Switzerland, all in under 40 days.
Oh, staggering.
That journey is the very definition of biological interconnectedness.
The isolation of the natural world is a complete illusion now. Human beings are overlapping with wild habitats more frequently and deeply than ever before. And our global transportation networks, they move us across the planet significantly faster than the incubation periods of the pathogens we encounter.
Right.
As long as a virus can hide quietly in a human host for 60 days, global health authorities will always be starting from behind.
Which brings us to the core tension of this entire story. The tragedy of the MV Hondius is a profound, highly specific stress test of our global immune system. And it leaves me with this lingering question to ponder long after we wrap up today.
What's that?
Well, we are an inherently curious species. We want to watch birds in deep Patagonia. We want to sail the South Atlantic. We want to explore the most remote, untouched corners of the Earth. But how do we balance our innate human desire for exploration with the biosecurity risks we inevitably bring back to our deeply connected modern world? Because the deeper we go into the wild, the more the wild comes back with us.